This is a TalkStation original podcast.
I'm Captain Mark with this week's Boating Safety Minute brought to you by your U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary, right here in Morehead City, where the water temperature this week will be in the low 60s. Last week we discussed different emergencies that could occur on your boat. These are checklists that you should also share with your crew. Create instructions for routine activities, such as using the head or range. List the location of important items, such as the first aid kit, PFDs, flares, and fire extinguishers, as well as switches and controls for critical equipment. Also, topics for crew briefings and inventory checks needed before getting underway for day, overnight, or extended trips. Local notice to mariners. Barton Inlet buoy number 28 reported missing. These Boating Safety Minutes are a public service of your U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary. I'm Captain Mark, and remember, an educated boater is a safe boater.
Looking for the best adventure on the Crystal Coast? Step aboard with H2O, Captain Eco Tour, private boat excursions, and experience the coast like never before. Cruise the Intracoastal Waterway. Search for wild horses on Shackleford Banks and the Rachel Carson Reserve. Spot playful dolphins, explore hidden shelling beaches, and enjoy unforgettable sunsets. Every trip is a private eco tour for up to 6 passengers, led by a U.S. Coast Guard 100-ton licensed master captain and authorized tour guide of the National Park Service and Rachel Carson Reserve. Perfect for families, couples, and visiting friends. Book your adventure today at h2ocaptain.com. That's h2ocaptain.com. H2O Captain, where the Crystal Coast comes alive. Welcome aboard.
Good evening, everyone. From the Pamlico to the New River, Chakawinity to Sneed's Ferry, Davis to LaGrange, Camp Lejeune to Cherry Point, Hoboken to Stella, the Pongo to the White Oak River, and Beaufort to New Bern. I'm Captain Mark, and you're listening to Talk Radio 107.1 FM on your dial, WTKF, the home of the Hugh Hewitt Show, as well as the home of the Lockwood Phillips Show, and now, the home of the Scoop Deck Show, where on Saturday nights, from 8:30 to 9 p.m., we will challenge our featured guest to engage us in how they and or their organization positively affects the lives of the people living in this broadcast area, as well as the visitors to this area, serving you the scoop you didn't know. Thank you for spending part of your Saturday night with us. Welcome aboard. Should you wish to contact the show to let us know how we're doing and why, we may read your comments over the air next Saturday evening. Writing this week were Jaime Reyes Gonzalez. He's the Flotilla Commander of the U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary 054-2002, where he said, like always, great job and good luck with your new show. Nicole Chicodetti, manager of Tower 7 Restaurant, said, Captain Mark with a podcast, a wonderful duo. And Judy Potofsky, general manager at the Crystal Coast Oceanside Hotel, said, the Scoop Deck, a needed voice for the area. Furthermore, if you wish to recommend a leader in your area who you feel should be a featured guest, or if you know a company who wishes to place their product or services in front of our wonderful listeners, please contact me via email at captainmark@thescoopdeck.com. You can also find that email on our website, thescoopdeck.com. Thank you in advance for caring enough to write. And speaking of a company with a fine product and service, our sponsor for this month of April is H2O Captain Eco Tour Private Boat Excursions, located in Morehead City. Our first guest was supposed to be the officer in charge of U.S. Coast Guard Station Fort Macon, Senior Chief Todd Gormley. Sadly, as the Department of Homeland Security is still undergoing a funding issue up in Washington, D.C., the Coast Guard does not want their fine men and women to perform PA, which stands for Public Affairs Events. This podcast would be considered a PA event. Hence, we look forward to rebooking Senior Chief Gormley at a mutually acceptable time in the near future. I wish to thank our featured guest, substituting for the Senior Chief, very much for her last-moment invitation and acceptance to the Scoop Deck. Sitting right before me is Ms. Christine Brin. Christine is an experienced museum educator, maritime historian, and public speaker with more than 20 years of experience in the museum education field. She is an associate education curator with the North Carolina Maritime Museum in Beaufort, where she primarily oversees the museum's public programming. Christine earned a bachelor's degree in history from Montclair State University and a master's in history from the University of North Carolina, Wilmington. She previously held educator positions at a series of sites, including the New Jersey Museum of Agriculture, which just happens to be on the Rutgers University campus, and the Plymouth Plantation in Massachusetts. Highlights of her career include working on the Mayflower II as an interpreter and coordinating the North Carolina Maritime Museum's annual murder mystery dinners. Christine strives to create educational and engaging program that combines history and science by incorporating culture, environment, and its influence on maritime history. When she is not working at the museum, Christine loves to spend time with her husband and their two beautiful children. Welcome, Associate Education Curator Christine.
Thank you very much. Glad to be here.
Glad to have you, and thank you at the last moment coming in. First and foremost, congratulations on the reopening of your fine institution located on Front Street in downtown Beaufort after 15 months of renovation. What were you doing during that time?
We were very busy, to say the least. In the education department, we continue to do programming as, I wouldn't say as normal, but we still continue to offer our lecture series. Fort Macon State Park was kind enough to host us there. We had a lot of great community partners that really stepped up to help host our programming. The town of Beaufort with the train depot hosted quite a few of our programs as well. So we kept up on it. We also redid the HVAC system in our building. Of the 15 exhibits in our museum, I think all 15 to one level or another had some level of renovation done, with 2 of them being completely renovated and redone. There's 2 brand new exhibits.
Please tell us about those new exhibits, and has there been any feedback from the public so far on them?
So we have the 2 new exhibits that we have. One is about the American Revolution, A250. It's the 250th anniversary, and that exhibit is slated to be up for a couple of years, and it's about our early stages going into the American Revolution of coastal North Carolina and how we participated. And then we have another exhibit that I'm proud of all of our exhibits, but I'm very excited for this one. It's Swell Times. It's about recreation on the water, and it talks about hunting on the water. It talks about surfing. It talks about even kiting in the area and diving. It touches on a lot of topics that we've previously kind of touched on a little bit more so in programming. So it's very exciting to see it in the exhibit space.
Love it, love it. And the public loves it so far as well?
They seem to love it. I've done a few different tours for the public of the spaces, and one of the things that really stands out to them, especially in Swell Times, is the color scheme that's coming with it. We've given it a brighter color scheme, and it really is very eye-catching. But the visitors, there's something for everybody to see. So the kids see the kites right away, and they want to talk about the kites. Visitors that haven't been to the building in many years will be excited to know that we have a boat from Barber Boat Works called the Silver Clipper that was on display up until about 10 or so years ago. It is back on display. So, yeah, there's been a lot of great response to it.
I come from a town that has a lot of attractions. That people come from all over the country to see, and even from around the world to engage with. Yet a lot of the locals from my town might, I don't want to say take it for granted, I think they're very proud that those attractions are there, but when it's their time to go on vacation, they oftentimes go to a different town. So my question for you is, and I know this may be outside of the numbers all the numbers that you have in your head, but might you know of the percentage of locals visiting your museum versus the people that are from out of town?
Oh, goodness. I couldn't even begin to guess on that one.
Okay.
We have, what's nice is a lot of the elementary schools have for generations been bringing fourth grade classes on field trips to our museum. So we have generations of locals that have been on their field trips, and then they come back later with their kids. But as far as percentage wise, I couldn't speak to that as well. I know that we do get a good amount. We've had quite a few locals coming in over the past couple of weeks after we reopened, excited to see what changes were made. But yeah, percentage wise, I wouldn't be able to
No
say
problem.
exactly.
Well, let's go back to what you're best at, and that's your presentations. I've been lucky enough to be at a number of your presentations, and I have found them very instructive, and I always leave with more knowledge from you than when I first came in.
Glad to hear it.
So I'm glad to say it. And one of your presentations, which I wasn't at and I'm interested in, was one entitled Trying Women, A History of Women in the Whaling Industry. As I am the owner and operator of H2O Captain, I talk to my passengers about the whaling that happened mainly off of Shackleford, but more broadly between Cape Fear and Cape Hatteras. I know the first commercial permit was given in 1669, although in my research I can't find any evidence that that first permit was actually utilized. But shortly after that, all the others were, and that started 2.5 centuries, I beg your pardon, of whaling in this area that ended in the 1920s. And I found it very interesting. I was at the Oceana seminar at Duke Marine Lab last week, and they stated there have been no deaths due to natural causes for the North Atlantic right whales ever recorded, except for prenatal deaths. And it's all been because of what we have done, either through hunting, ship strikes, and net entanglements. When I've spoken to my passengers about this, I've never broken it down by gender. And yet you have a whole presentation on that. Please tell us the role women had during this 250-year period.
Well, I'm still piecing it together. One of the intriguing things for me is, yes, we have a very interesting history with whaling in our area, and the East Coast of America in general has a very colorful history and intriguing. But when I went to look at what women were doing in the whaling industry, there was a lot of, I'd almost call it folklore, people saying, oh, well, women kept house or women did this, but there was no historical evidence actually supporting that. And one of the things I talk about in my presentation is the fact that people, you know this probably just as well as me, people in Carteret County have long memories as far as history goes. They will hold a grudge for 4 generations. They will hold a memory for 4 generations. They remember their grandfather catching a lobster off of the coast and go and visit. But they, I would get people coming to me and they would say, oh yeah, the women definitely were doing things like working the trypots where they were boiling the oil out of the blubber on the beach. But I could never find a local family where they had that memory. That nobody was like, oh, I remember great grandmama telling me about the hours that she spent. I mean, this is a task that would have taken hours to do. And it was very curious to me, and still remains very curious to me, that despite all of these long memories here in Carteret County and any local family, nobody really had that memory of what women were doing. So I had to really dig and figure it out. And yeah, they were, in fact, working the tripods. Why this oral history hasn't gotten passed down, there's a lot of possible reasons for it. But women were largely not participating in the active hunting of the whales. They weren't going out in the boats. They weren't spearing them. But they were processing the meat. It does appear that they were processing the material once they came back to shore, because here in North Carolina, it was primarily shore-based whaling. We didn't see men going off in ships for years at a time like you would hear from New England or Moby Dick would talk about.
Yeah, from the Boston School of Hunting and New York School as well. Yes.
Yeah, so we see a lot of women in the support roles. We also see women later on in this kind of whaling industry period. The wives of whalers start going out on the ships with them. And that's not out of North Carolina, that's out of the Northeast, but we do see the wives start to go out there, and they give us a lot of great insight into what the whaling industry looked like, because they keep journals. And their journals are a lot more personal than what the captain's journal. The captain's log is going to tell us what direction they went, what temperature the weather is, what temperature the water is, or such. And they might have an incident on their ship, and the captain will go, "Oh, today John died and we buried him at sea." But then you get the wife, and she'll have her journal, and she'll go, "Oh, John had influenza and we treated him like this, and this is how we tried to save him. And then when we buried him at sea, we wrapped him in sailcloth and used this stitch." Information that really is helpful for me. I have found a couple whaling voyages where the only documentation of that whaling voyage is the wife's journal, because all the other information has been lost. So we see them going out on the ship and supporting their whaling, the captains. We see them on land continuing to process the whales here, especially in North Carolina. We also see them starting businesses. In Nantucket, there's a whole row that was known as, it was Petticoat Lane, it was called, because so many women had started businesses to help support their families while their husbands were away. So we see women, even here potentially in coastal North Carolina, moving into this kind of retail experience of selling and commerce.
Wow. I didn't even know of that. And they were using the baleen and boat and bones in their storefronts.
They were using... Yes, they could use it in their storefronts. They could, mostly out of North Carolina, we see they would have used it locally, but they could have also exported it. Oil was the big goal, though.
Clearly. So they would work on the blubber at the beach at Shackleford, let's say. And then the men would, I know, put a piece of timber over their shoulders, and it had the 50-gallon wood containers where they brought that then over to the Sound side, then brought to Beaufort or Harker's Island by boat to be sold on the mainland and
or exported out
and exported. Yes. Oh, very interesting. Well, on the Crystal Coast, which brings in tens of thousands of dollars into this area, and I guess we'll find out the exact answers next week when we have the executive director of Crystal Coast Tourism Development, and he'll tell us how many dollars are spent here on ecotourism, hotels, vacation rentals, restaurants, gas stations, boating, etc. We are all trying to preserve its natural beauty on our land and in our beautiful waterways. Please share with us some bullet points about another program you had presented to the public called Going at Sea, I beg your pardon, A Brief History of Maritime Waste Management.
Oh, yes. This one was inspired when we had our bathrooms at the museum renovated a few years ago, and it became the topic of conversation for a solid year of what was going on with our bathrooms.
You are blushing right now. You do realize that.
It was quite a topic. So the presentation is about the evolution of, obviously, waste management on a ship. And it's one of my favorite topics to talk about when visitors come in, because a lot of visitors know that on a boat you would refer to the bathroom as the head, but few know why. And it comes from the early days of sailing, where if you were going to throw waste off your ship or dispose of something on a sailing vessel, you don't want to do it on the back of the ship because the wind is always at your back. It's always blowing towards the front. on a sailing vessel. So you always want to dispose of waste at the head or front of the ship, which the front of the ship on a sailing vessel is called the head. So the reason that modern sailors call, or even in the Coast Guard, call the bathroom the head is because of that. And that's something that I talk about in that presentation.
I'm a 100-ton U.S. Coast Guard licensed captain, and you just took me to school.
Oh, really?
By teaching me something. I knew it was called the head, obviously, but I didn't know the history behind that. So thank you for that instruction.
And a fair warning, if it's a motorized vessel, don't use the head of the ship because the wind goes in the other direction. So that's when you get to use the poop deck.
Thank you. As opposed to the scoop deck right here.
Yeah.
Since you are so involved with the public programming, can you give us a hint? Can you share with us the next program that you are developing to present to the public for the museum?
Oh, I've been working on a presentation about Janet Shaw. She is a Scottish lady who came to visit the Cape Fear region of North Carolina at the very beginning of the American Revolution, and she actually kept her own journal where she writes about her observations. She sees the burning of the fort down there. She sees them burning tea and going and rebelling, and it is really exciting because this woman is very sassy and very outspoken, and I can't wait to be able to share her with the public.
Well, we all look forward to hearing and seeing you present that. How do you personally, and I know you've given us already a number of thoughts, and or the museum, positively affect the locals and the visitors here in our area?
By understanding and appreciating the history and culture and environment of our area, I think people can really find the better value in it. And really, at our museum, you learn about the history of the area, you learn about the culture of the area, you learn also, like I said, about the environment. And when they start to learn about it and they start to understand it, they start to value it. And once they understand the value, they start to reinvest in it. So it's really this kind of circle of education leading into reinvestment. I'm not just referring to money, but just in, they might walk down the street and because they better understand our environment, pick up that piece of garbage that they see sitting there. So.
Thank you, Christine, and thank you so much again for appearing here today on the Scoop Deck at the last moment.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you again to our sponsor, whom without H2O Captain Echo Tour private boat excursions, we would not be with you this evening. Our wonderful music was composed by Kenneth L. Weissman. I wish to thank my producer and engineer, Ross, sitting right across from me. We look forward to your email comments. Next week, the Scoop Deck featured guest will be Jim Browder. He is the Executive Director of the Crystal Coast Tourism Development Authority, right here on Talk Radio WTKF 107.1. The Scoop Deck wishes everyone that celebrates Easter and to those that observe Passover a happy and healthy holiday week. And remember, on the Scoop Deck, you heard it here first. This is Captain Mark, out.